The Patmos Prophecies of the Apostle St. John. Origins. Good morning and welcome to this first video in the series. This one, video 1, explaining the origins to the two books titled the Patmos Prophecies, Book 1 and Book 2. Although it's two books, the division was one of practicality. The original manuscript was too bulky and uncomfortable to manhandle, and it was decided to separate the text into two. However, the two books should be read as one, as many of St. John's prophecies cross-reference across the two books. The Patmos Prophecies address St. John's revelation prophecies from the Holy Bible. The obvious question must be, why the Patmos Prophecies? As to the title, I allowed myself to be guided by the Holy Spirit. During the early days of writing, when I had still no comprehension with what I was confronted with, or where it would all lead, the name flooded my mind. From that moment I knew that it had to be the title of whatever I was busy producing. Looking back, I understand. It fitted in with God's modus operandi. The Holy Bible, through numerous examples, confirmed that God's preferred modus operandi was the indirect approach. God hardly ever makes a decisive contact from the direction we anticipate. Let us consider two examples, one from the Old Testament and the other from the New. First, from the Old Testament, David. The shepherd boy, David, is a prime example as to this indirect approach. As a young shepherd boy, he was sent by his father to take food to his brothers that were performing military service against the invading Philistine foe. Upon his arrival in the Israelite military lager, he finds the Israelite soldiers demoralized and swept by a morbid fear. A giant from the Philistine camp, called Goliath, had come forth and challenged the Israelite soldiers to a duel. Such was his size and reputation that one and all, including the king, feared Goliath. The young David was surprised at the lack of faith and resolve of the Israelite soldiers and volunteered to face Goliath in battle. We can only imagine that once the laughter had calmed down and the Israelite soldiers realized that the young David was serious, they must have rushed him to the king's tent. And we can imagine that the very relieved king must have tried to dress the young David in his armor, but to no avail. David was a young shepherd boy, not an adult trained warrior. Armed with a slingshot and 5 round stones, the young David went forth to challenge Goliath. David must have been of a very nondescript stature at this time, for the biblical records confirmed that Goliath was both bemused and surprised, questioning if this was the best that Israel could send out against him. Whilst Goliath was dressed in armor, the young David had none. What the biblical records do not state was that this disparity was to the young David's advantage, leaving him agile and nimble. This probably allowed him to escape Goliath's spear and for him to remain beyond the reach of his sword. And when David finally struck the blow with his slingshot, it was a fatal blow between the eyes of Goliath. The Bible confirmed that Goliath dropped dead. The death of Goliath, the hero, filled the Philistine camp with dread, and on the Israelite side with new resolve, and the Israelites launched a counterattack on the Philistines, defeating them in a running battle. The Goliath incident sets the young David on the first steps along the path to rise and become the most famous king of Israel. However, despite his beloved status before God, in later years, once he had become king of Israel, his actions confirmed that he was an ordinary man, not without his weaknesses. Observing the wife of one of his military officers taking a rooftop bath, King David summons her and engaged in an extramarital affair. To hide the affair and his indiscretion, he arranged for the officer to be stationed in the front ranks during battle. As anticipated, the officer fell in battle, but King David could not hide his affair from God and suffers his punishment and consequences. Yet, despite his shameful act, King David remained faithful to his God, and despite David's sin, God did not abandon him. From shepherd boy to accidental warrior to king, not your ordinary career path. If we look at the example from the New Testament, we have to look no further than Jesus, the Messiah. If ever there must have been an enigma for the Jewish people suffering under the Roman occupation, it must have been Jesus appearing in their midst. In their paradigm as to an anticipated Messiah, they were anticipating a warrior king along the lines of the Old Testament's King David, that would come to free them from the yoke of Roman occupation. To their surprise and evident disappointment, they got a carpenter's son that told them to render taxes unto Caesar. The Israelite expectation of a royal king was stretched beyond its elastic limits when this carpenter's son that concerned him with the social rejects of society, the misfits, the shamed, the unwanted, the damned, the ill, the cursed. Yet, when he teached and healed, they came from all layers of society, and they came in ever-growing numbers. The astounding fact of his teachings was that according to the Holy Bible, Jesus had never travelled more than 120 kilometers from Jerusalem, yet by word of mouth and other means, his message of salvation found fertile spiritual ground and spread like wildfire throughout the region, even before the apostles were tasked to spread the faith. St. Paul, before he was called, persecuted believers to the new faith as far north as Damascus. By the time of his crucifixion, it was already an established faith, albeit by and large clandestine, and had followers as distant as Rome and Macedonia. These are extraordinary facts for these times. News travelled at a pedestrian pace and was predominantly communicated by word of mouth. A carpenter's son, assisted by 12 tradesmen, had grounded a new faith in Israel that 2,000 years later would still reverberate throughout the region and globally evoke passionate responses and daily attract new followers. A king, with all the nation's resources at his disposal, could possibly achieve such a feat. But a carpenter's son that owned nothing, not even his own house, not even his own clothes, or a tomb to be buried in. Unlikely. Yet that is exactly what Jesus and his 12 disciples had achieved. It was no different with the Patmos Prophecies. The book or books, the Patmos Prophecies, were neither foreseen nor planned. Once again, the Holy Ghost had engaged from an unexpected direction. In 2008, my then 14-year-old daughter elected to attend a school in a neighboring town, which is about 45 kilometers distance from our residence. This necessitated her to stay in the school hostel during the weeks, only coming home for the weekends. She then attended Sunday school at our local church on Sundays, together with her younger brother. And so it came that in early May 2008, she joined me after Sunday school with a troubled look clouding her young features. By the time we reached home, the dam wall had ruptured. Her class had been divided into two groups. She was the team leader of one, and the assignment was to, by mid-June 2008, in a 20-minute talk, present their understanding of the Book of Revelations. I had sufficient peripheral knowledge as to the Book of Revelations to know that some of the most noteworthy theologians had mumbled and bumbled their way through St. John's prophecies, leaving their audiences afterwards even more confused than before. I therefore considered the assignment unreasonable, as the mystery of the Book of Revelations exceeded the capacity of most adults, let alone a 14-year-old kid. To guide me along, I decided to compile a 3-column matrix, with the first recording the verse, the second the opinion of the so-called expert, and the third space for me to add my 2 pennies worth. So it came that I committed to assist, allowing her to focus on upcoming mid-year school examinations. The first step was to raid the local libraries of every source of reference related to the Book of Revelations. I next filtered the references that were either devoid of credibility or were of such a dubious nature that it would not stand even a basic test of factual credibility. It rapidly reduced the stockpile by some 80%. This turned out to be a valuable exercise. I learned that even theologians with strings of titles behind their names, when addressing the Book of Revelations, relied on astounding leaps of faith in the manner they treated their facts, and relied on assumptions unrelated to any credible cross-reference to the Revelations prophecies or the Holy Bible to advance their arguments and beliefs. They one and all lacked one crucial feature. None could provide a logical, fact-based mythology to beyond reasonable doubt prove how they had arrived at their solutions. By Monday 26th of May and Revelation 16, I was as confused and perplexed as the best Revelations expert. At the mysterious beasts and many calamities that confronted me. I honestly cannot recall how serious I was, but I do recall that I had made a very brief, informal prayer for assistance, asking for wisdom, insight, and guidance. In all honesty, I did not anticipate an answer, and there was none. Not on the evening of the 26th of May, not on the 27th of May, but at or about 23:40 on the 28th of May, there was an answer. What was so significant to the event on the 28th of May? At this time I was busy copying text of Revelation 16 into the matrix I had compiled. Suddenly the ambient temperature in the room took a dramatic drop, possibly as much as 5 degrees Celsius, if not more. A pungent sweet smell, similar to gardenian blossoms in bloom, flooded the room. My body went pins and needles, and an incredible feeling of excited calmness flooded me. And the term excited calmness is the best that I can possibly describe what I experienced. Next to my computer stand, a copy of the King James Bible, the 93:6 reprint of the original text, lay open. As my eyes scanned across the reference, I was presented a vision of a white-painted helicopter coming into land in a snow-covered landscape. A snow flurry was blown up by the downdraft of the rotors just before touchdown. The vision was accompanied by a voice stating, in my home language of Afrikaans, "Skryf wat jy sien." Translated to English, "Write what you see." I recorded the vision in Afrikaans. As soon as I had recorded it, the next followed. It continued for some time, then silence, followed by the voice, once again in Afrikaans. Jy moet rus, jy moet binnekort jou dogter gaan haal. You must rest, you must shortly fetch your daughter. When I looked down at my watch, it was 5:30 on Friday the 30th of May, 2008. I had unwittingly been recording visions non-stop from about 23:40 on Wednesday evening, 28th of May 2008 to 5:30 on Friday morning, oblivious to the passing of time. I neither hungered nor thirst. I was just filled by this incredible energy rush. Thereafter, every time I sat down to work on the prophecies, the visions would start running within 2 to 5 minutes. By mid-July 2008, the vision stopped once again, followed by the voice, "Cast the net wider, cast the net wider." After some confusion and the pause of a few days, I realized the command was now in English. I revisited all the previous recorded visions and translated them into English. As I translated the last sentence, the vision started running again. 7 years later, I had the final results in my hand. Thank you for watching the origins to the book, the Patmos Prophecies. The next video in this series will guide you through how the prophecies decipher. Have a nice day.